Welcome back. Now that we have an understanding of what data flow is, let's switch over to the Azure portal, and I'll give you a quick tour of the interface. Okay, here we are in our data factory. Let's go to Author tab. And then data flows can be created by clicking the three dots here, and click New Data Flow. As you can see here, this looks very similar to a pipeline. So we can design our data flow here, and we can set the parameters and settings for the data flow here, and we can set the properties of the data flow here. I'm going to call mine as DF Test. And when you come to design the data flow, you will be creating transformations. So in terms of transformations, the source and the sink transformation are mandatory for a data flow. The other transformations, you can have any number of transformations, but Microsoft recommends having a limited number of manageable transformations, rather than having one big transformation with a number of transformation actions happening there. So let's click on the Add Source, and you can choose the data set you want to use as a source. As you can remember, this is the one we created as part of our pipelines previously, so that's the DSECDC file list dynamic. And because it's a source, you get other options as well to configure. So source options, this is very similar to what we see on the copy activity. And these things here, the four options here are going to be the same for either transformations you're going to create. So this tells you the column name and the type, and you can inspect the metadata, so that is again, your column name and type. And if this transformation output under the column that will lap you here as well and optimize, this is to do any kind of performance tuning. As we discussed previously, Data Factory submits these data flows to a Databricks cluster and they run a Spark job. As you know, Spark runs on a distributed computing, so partitioning is quite crucial to get the right performance out of the Spark cluster. So you can use the current partitioning, so that'll be decided by Data Factory based on the source partitioning, or you can set it to single partition, but if you set it on single partition, it'll run as one thread, which is not going to be as sufficient. And you can also set your own partitioning. So you got the standard partitioning methodologies like round robin, hash, or dynamic range, fixed range, and key. So if you know the data better and if you think data flow is not doing the partitioning as you would expect, you can come here and set the partitioning strategy you want to set. And data preview. So you can also preview the data that is being sent through your transformations while you're building it. But the only thing you need to bear in mind is in order to do that, you need to enable the data flow debug. What that does is that'll spin up a little Spark cluster as defined in our integration runtime that is normally a 4-core work node and 4-core driver node Spark cluster, and that will be running. When you have that running, you can see the data as it flows through the system. But one important thing there is because you are spinning up a Spark cluster, you will be charged for that Spark cluster. And once you've developed the data flow, you can either turn off the data flow debug so that the Spark cluster gets shut down and destroyed, or if you leave it for 60 minutes, that is the time to leave for the Spark cluster, it'll automatically be shut down. But please bear in mind that there is a cost involved, but if you are in a free subscription, that will be a minimal, so you won't have to worry too much about it. And this is a source transformation, but we also have a number of other transformations offered by data flow. So these are the list of transformations. So you've got the multiple inputs and output transformations category, which includes join, conditional split, exist, union, and lookup. And you've got schema modifiers. They work on just modifying the schema as the data flows through. So that'll be adding a new column, for example, using a direct column or selecting only a subset of the columns being passed through. And you can aggregate the data. You can build a surrogate key if you are doing a fact dimension kind of data model. And you can pivot your data or unpivot your data, and you can use the window transformations to do the window aggregate functions there. And you can flatten your data and you can rank them as well. And in terms of role modify, you've got these three. So you can filter out your data and you can sort them and you can alter row as well. And as I said before, you can have the sync transformation that is a mandatory one for data flow, so you do all of those things. Once you created your data flow, you need to execute that. The data flows themselves are not executable, so you'll have to build a pipeline to execute a data flow. So similar to what we did previously, you've got a data flow activity, so you bring that in here and then use an existing data flow, or if you want to create a new one, but we created an existing one just now, so let's pick that one and then you click OK. Now, you specify the settings for the data flow activity. So your settings have to be which kind of cluster you want to run on and which integration runtime you want to run your cluster on as well. So in this case, you can pick up small, medium, large. When you choose any of these categories behind the scene, it pick up general purpose or computer optimized or memory optimized depending on your workload. And then you can pick up the core count as well, actually. This is the smallest one, which I talked about previously, but you can go much higher than that. And you can specify any parameters you want to send to your data flow. We didn't create any parameters there, but if you had some, you can send them from your pipeline to your data flow. So that is quite powerful. You can have the parameters send from even a trigger to a pipeline to this data flow, and then you can have parameters into your transformation actions as well. So once you built this pipeline, similar to what we did previously, you can trigger the pipeline or execute the pipeline, and you can monitor them in the standard monitor, active monitor pane here. So with that, you get to a full power of Data Factory and all the monitoring capabilities we talked about for your data flows as well. I hope that pretty much gives you an idea of how to create a data flow and what data flows are. In the next session, we'll start creating a data flow and process some of the data we've already ingested in our previous modules. See you then.